Welcome back to Entertainment Talk. Today we're here to do a rankings or listing or whatever you want to call it for some PlayStation 1 games. I'm your host Matthew. Joining me today, my co-host is Barry. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Looking forward to doing this. It's been a long time. I don't believe we've done a podcast since April.
30th of April. Yeah, we talked about that the other day.
That is a long time. It
Yeah.
feels like an eternity, to be quite honest. But
yeah.
just happy to be doing one again.
Cool. Nice. So just before we get into the rankings, I just want to have a little discussion about this really big era of games that we're going to talk about, specifically the 90s era of PlayStation 1 games, which in my opinion, this is just my opinion, it's not a fact, I think is one of the greatest, if not the greatest era of video games. You've got several characters that were created at that time. You got Crash Bandicoot, Tomb Raider, Metal Gear Solid, Abe, Resident Evil, Tony Hawk, Silent Hill. I could go Final Fantasy VII, one of the most critically acclaimed and loved games of all time. Things like Grand Theft Auto 1 and a ton of others as well. So I think it's fair to say not only did this give birth would be a weird way to put it. Not only did this era sort of create a lot of these really critically acclaimed characters and franchises. You think of what's come out of stuff like Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid and all these other games. It's quite an incredible era of games. What do you think of it?
Oh, the PlayStation 1 undeniably is one of the greatest video game consoles of all time. When it was released in the UK here in 1995, it very quickly went on to become the biggest selling video game console of all time, and it's kind of easy to see why. It had so many quality games churned out within that time. And to be honest, though, I don't think anyone was taking it seriously to begin with, because, the whole video game industry was pretty much owned by Nintendo and Sega at that point. Yeah. Obviously, before Nintendo, you had Atari. Nintendo basically put Atari out of business. Nintendo come along. You had Sega. And then Sony entering the video game market. It's kind of interesting, really, because I think Sony originally were going to work in cahoots with Nintendo for this console. And the whole deal went kaput, and Sony decided to go their own direction and make their own video game console. And that was the PlayStation.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's fair to say it certainly worked, because we're about to get the 5th PlayStation. So yeah. Lots of things have changed. Of course, licenses have changed here and there. I'm going to mention certain different things here and there with certain things I know about. I think what we should do with this list. So we've got a top 5, and then I've got one, well, kind of an honourable mention, or it's basically my number 6. How many honourable mentions do you have for your list?
Yeah, I mean, needless to say, this list wasn't easy to do because there's a hell of a lot of great games for PS1. But just a couple of honourable mentions I'll quickly kind of just talk about briefly.
Okay. I think what we'll do then, to make this a little bit interesting, if you do all of your honourable mentions first, I will do my number 6, and then you jump into number 5, and then we'll take turns as we go from 5 to 1, if you get what I mean.
Okay.
So which of your... pick your first honourable mention. What would that be?
Okay, well, the first honourable mention, I was very torn, actually, because this is a franchise that consists of many games, and it's Crash Bandicoot 3. I could have picked 1, I could have picked 2. Obviously, Crash Bandicoot, PlayStation icon, Nintendo had Mario, Sega had Sonic, Sony come up with their own. Crash Bandicoot, and it's one of the best platforming franchises out there. Especially love the first 3 games. Obviously, we had the remastered edition not long back. Great platforming series, and quite challenging as well. Certainly the first game. I actually think the first game is actually the toughest of the bunch.
Oh, easily, yeah.
But with the third game, they obviously threw in a lot more kind of gameplay varieties. There's flying levels. You've got the traditional, all of these Crash games are renowned for having their running levels. In the first game, it was on a wild pig. On the second game, it was on a baby polar bear. It's very much become a tradition of the series. But I really like the different variety of levels in the third game. So for me, it's one of the best platform games of the PlayStation 1.
Definitely, yeah. Just to be clear as well, we're doing one per franchise. Otherwise, I'd have Crash Bandicoot 1, 2, and 3 in this list. So,
Yeah,
yeah. Cool. Yeah, I'll be giving some thoughts certainly later on Crash Bandicoot 3 because obviously it's in my list. So, I don't think that that's any secret, you know. I've made it quite clear
yeah.
of how big of a Crash fan I am. So, cool. What's your next honorable mention?
The next one, this nearly got into the top five actually.
Mm.
It almost got into the top five. It's very much a classic of the survival horror genre, released in '99, and that is Silent Hill. Now, the original Silent Hill is actually one of the scariest games I've played. It's certainly one of the most atmospheric. What I love about the Silent Hill franchise is its emphasis on psychological horror. When this game came out, like I said, in '99, I hadn't really played a game like it. You only really had kind of like a couple of big survival horror game franchises around at that time. And Silent Hill, it's creepy, as I said, it's atmospheric, and it's very psychologically orientated. And even the score in this game is creepy. Now, this was one of the late PlayStation 1 releases. This was kind of like near the tail end. This was, like I say, '99. This come out. This nearly got into my number five spot because I actually think it's still now Silent Hill 2. I think is a strong contender for best survival horror game of all time. I mean, I think it's widely regarded as being the best in the franchise, but obviously that was PlayStation 2. That came out 2 years later. So yeah, Silent Hill. I think it's one of the best survival horror games, and it's a franchise I'd love to see make a comeback.
Yeah, you'd have to politely ask Konami about that. I don't know what their
Yeah,
response would be,
it's not
but
going to be any time soon, I don't think. But yeah,
yeah, yeah. Some people are speculating, just a quick side note, some people are speculating that there is a new game in development and will be revealed at this week's PlayStation event. I wouldn't hold my breath for that. I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. That's just I don't think that's gonna happen. But anyway, yeah, the Silent Hill franchise to me is one that I've never really sort of clicked with in terms of the PlayStation side of horror. I've always been a bit more into Resident Evil, for better and for worse. I've
yeah,
played Resident Evil 5. I know how bad that the franchise can get, but certainly with the previous games, it's done some pretty good stuff. So I knew that would kind of come up in this list because you're more into the sort of Silent Hill psychological stuff, and I'm more into the survival horror zombie type of that type of
yeah.
survival. So
Yeah, I
but
mean, I mean, Silent Hill has a lot of issues, gameplay wise, and that. It has issues. It has a lot of clunky controls and all this and that. But from a narrative perspective and everything, I just love the uh, the atmosphere that this game actually conveys and the surrealism and all that. But you're right, I'm a big fan of psychological horror. There's very kind of David Lynchian, who's obviously a very surrealistic horror director. There's definitely kind of echoes of Lynch in that franchise, and that's kind of what really appeals to me.
yeah, yeah. So you had three honorable mentions, did you?
Oh, sorry, just
Okay,
two.
just
Sorry,
two.
yeah,
All right, I'll go with my number six, which is technically my honorable mention, but we can rank that however. My number six is Tomb Raider, released in 1996, developed by Core Design, and published by Square Enix, who still have the rights to the games, and recently did the newer reboot and stuff, developed by Crystal Dynamics, the newer ones, who also went on to make the Avengers game, which I will not talk about here. But yeah, Tomb Raider, yeah, really kind of, it's interesting because people talk about, they like to compare the sort of modern day Tomb Raider games and Uncharted and how they kind of technically inspired each other in a way. And if you do look at the newer Tomb Raider games and you look at the older ones, there's certainly a bit of a change there in terms of the newer Tomb Raider games are much more Uncharted-like, whereas if you look at some of the original, like the original PS1 games and this first Tomb Raider game that I'm talking about here, just a very kind of difference in terms of less sort of action oriented and more kind of survival oriented, and you had like less equipment. You weren't like grappling around all over the place like you are in the newer games and stuff. But it's certainly a memorable kind of experience. I did play some of the first Tomb Raider game, and I never quite got around to finishing it, probably for some reason. But every time I sort of see clips of it or pieces of it and that, I am still kind of inclined to go back and kind of revisit the series. But the original sort of releases of the series. But yeah, I quite liked what they did with them. I thought they were quite good. What's your thoughts on Tomb Raider? The
Tomb
originals?
Raider. Tomb Raider is, believe it or not, I know it's one of the, one of the most popular, and certainly Lara Croft, without a doubt, is one of the most iconic characters in the history of video games.
Yeah.
It's just never been a franchise that clicked with me. I'm not actually a big fan of the original Tomb Raider games. I always struggled. With them. The control mechanics, and I I found like in those games that the most basic of jumps was made a lot harder than it should have been because of the erratic camera. And Tomb Raider is just not a franchise I could ever really get to grips with. And when it was rebooted in 2013, which, getting back to kind of what you said, it clearly adopted some of the Uncharted gameplay elements. And I actually thought it was great. I actually thought it was the reboot that franchise very much needed. So I really liked 2013's Tomb Raider. Admittedly, I've not played Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I did really like Rise of the Tomb Raider. But no, I was just never. Everyone else seemed to love it. It wasn't really one of my. I mean, it kind of gave us our first big commercially successful female video game character.
Yeah.
Because long before her, though, there was a character from Metroid. The lead character in that game is called Samus.
Yeah,
and the
Samus,
kind of twist in that game was that Samus was actually a woman. But yeah, Lara Croft was our kind of first big leading female video game character. And it's just, I was never a big fan of Tomb Raider, which I kind of felt a bit weird for because everyone else was ranting and raving about it and loving it. And I just could never really get into it.
Yeah.
But
that's my one and only honourable mention, or number 6. So now we're going to take turns and go from 5 to 1.
Hey there, I'm Aaron Holman, host of Eye to Eye, a weekly podcast talk show all about passion.
I have this passion and this fire within me that burns brighter than the fire around me.
Flow.
With performing, there's always a story to tell, whether it's my own or not.
And creativity.
I go, he's more than cute, he's creative.
All with an LGBT twist. Make sure to check out Eye to Eye, that's EYE, number 2, letter I. And rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in today.
I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we are Killer Fun. We explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week.
For as long as people have been communicating, they have been talking about who did what to whom, and is that socially acceptable?
Because the boundaries of society,
crime,
and entertainment have always gone hand in hand.
The more salacious,
or weird,
the better. From books and movies
to television shows and games,
we look at how life and art imitate and inform one another.
And we can't get together and not laugh. So let's face it, there's going to be laughing.
Killer Fun is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, so join us.
If you'd like to get started with a domain name and a website today, just click on the link in the show notes and that will take you over to Koalu to get started. They also have a live support chat system that you can use, which is in the bottom right hand corner. So get started with a new website and domain name today with Koalu. Hey everybody, if you would like to get the ad-free versions of all of our podcasts and support Entertainment Talk along the way, all you need to do is head over to patreon.com/entertainment talk. Sign up either as a creator or as a Patreon, there's no difference there. That's just the option for either becoming a creator now or just staying as a patron for the moment. And then all you need to do is support us at the $1 level tier. That will get you access to all of the ad-free podcasts that we've done in the past, and get you access to all the ad-free podcasts in that month as well. So it's a great way to support us on Entertainment Talk and to get rid of the ads and get your ad-free podcasts. You can also become a patron at the $3 level tier. That gets you access to ad-free podcasts and allows you to redeem a review of a TV show or a film of entirely your choice. That's one per month for either a TV show or a film review, which is at the $3 level tier. As always, thank you very much for listening. Back to the show. So what's your number 5?
Okay, number 5 is actually the third installment in a long-running video game franchise. Admittedly, I'm not really into this franchise now anymore, but back then when this came out, this was one of my favorite video game franchises, and that's Tekken 3. Now, Tekken 3 is obviously, it's actually, I believe, now the most successful fighting game franchise of all time in terms of game sales. I love Tekken. I mean, Tekken, the very first Tekken came out, PlayStation 1 in 95 in the UK. It was the game that I got on release day. Tekken 2 was a great sequel. It did everything that the first game did, but better. And the third game was even better. It went up a few gears. And I know among a lot of Tekken fans, they would actually consider the third to still be arguably the best in the franchise. It introduced quite a few notable new characters in Ling Xiaoyu, Hwoarang, Eddie Gordo, Brian Fury. There's quite a few characters that were added to that roster who have now gone on to become some of the most popular characters in the franchise. Great fight mechanics for its time. It's notable for it introduced the sidestep, which of course has become a big thing for many Tekken players. And not only that, I mean, it had a huge move list and a huge array of characters, but it actually had a couple of really notable kind of side mission things. There was actually Tekken Ball, volleyball, but in the Tekken universe, which was actually great fun. That was like a game in itself. There was also Tekken Force, which was kind of like a very Streets of Rage-esque side-scrolling fighter as well. So they threw all these little kind of extra little games into the game. And I thought Tekken 3, certainly when it came out, I remember pre-ordering it. It was released in 98, and I was so excited, and I played it, and I just fell in love with it. For me, it was the best 3D fighting game on the PlayStation 1.
Cool. In terms of Tekken, for me, I've really got no opinion at all of it necessarily. I've not really ever followed the series. I think I probably played the game a little bit when I was younger and stuff, but it's never been a franchise I'm just completely neutral on it. So
yeah.
I've not got too much to add. But with that, I'm going to move on to my number 5, which is going to be Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, released in 1999, developed by Neversoft, who I don't think are actually around anymore, and Treyarch, who definitely are because they still work on the Call of Duty games, published by Activision. Activision do still own the Tony Hawk games because they just actually remastered this game along with the second one, which you can go and get on PlayStation 4, Xbox, PC. I don't think it's on Switch, but you can go and get those on Xbox and PS4. It created probably one of the, if not the most iconic skating level in gaming, that warehouse level at the start with, I think it was called American Boy, the song for that was playing
I
with
think
that
was
time.
it, yeah.
Yeah, I tell you, the amount of times I've seen pictures or videos or just heard that song over the course of most of my life, because this game's been out since 99, is quite often actually. It gets, when I hear conversations about like classic video games or some of the best games that people would love to see come back, this is usually in that conversation, and thankfully it did actually get a remaster, which didn't blow up as much as I thought it would, the actual news of that, but the game is available now and you can actually go and play it on PS4 and Xbox, which I haven't played the remaster myself, but I hear very, very good things about it, which is always what you want. So, Neversoft I don't think are around anymore. Treyarch are still around because they make, they're in the rotation of Call of Duty developers. You got that as well. But Activision still got that to this day as well. So, what's your thoughts on the Tony Hawk games?
Admittedly, I've never played that much of them, but from what I have played, now that is one of, I think I've only played 2 games in the entire franchise, and it's great fun. It's addictive, pick up and play. Really enjoyed playing it. I just haven't really played that much of it. But I know it's a very popular video game franchise, and it's regarded by many actually to be one of the best video games of all time. I certainly had a lot of fun playing it. It's just not a franchise that I'm kind of very well versed in.
Right. Yeah. I've only played the first one, and I think it was called Tony Hawk's Underground. It was on PlayStation 2. I think that's what it was called. It was a little bit more sort of open world-esque. But
Yeah.
those are the two that I remember playing. And then there was, of course, the awful Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, which was basically released so that Activision could keep, or so that they could keep the license. So, but the remasters of 1 and 2 are out now. So, what's your number 4 on the list?
Oh, number four's a game that probably needs no real introduction, actually. It's getting back to survival horror, which I would say it's arguably the best in the franchise. And that's Resident Evil 2, which came out in '98. Again, same year as Tekken 3. They're two games I was very much excited for. Resident Evil, obviously that was kind of the first big, what you'd say, commercially successful survival horror game. I think that's a classic. Admittedly, it hasn't aged well, but still, it's a classic of the time. Resident Evil 2 is a game that's just very much kind of on a bigger scale. Obviously, I love the original's claustrophobic aspect set in the mansion. Resident Evil 2, obviously, we get the city. Pretty much most of the game is actually in the police station. But yeah, again, it's a game that I found that, unlike Silent Hill, Resident Evil's, it's kind of zombies and it's more about jump scares and all that. But it managed to be pretty intense and it managed to be quite challenging, because I'm not sure if you remember, well, there was a remake recently, so
yeah.
I know you've played it. Is like, for example, the save system, you've got to find a typewriter and all that, and you've got to really try and conserve your ammo, and it was quite challenging, but it was a game that wasn't just about zombies. There was other creatures in there. I particularly remember the giant alligator boss in it, that are kind of an little homage to Jaws. You blow up the canister in its mouth. You can either do that or waste 40 shots on it. But I think Resident Evil 2 is actually, again, one of the best survival horror games out there. I think it's actually better than the first game, but the first game's great. And the remake that came out, not too long back, was fantastic. A great remake. Mm-hmm. In some aspects, I would actually say it improves on the original. But I mean, the one bit that I always remember in Resident Evil 2, the one bit that actually made me jump like hell, and it was a great little nod to 68's Night of the Living Dead, was where you're walking down the corridor, the boarded up windows, and the zombies' arms come out through the boarded up windows. I mean, that made me drop my controller. I think Resident Evil 2, it's a great sequel and just a really good survival horror game. I mean, admittedly, like Silent Hill, it has some gameplay issues. Some of the, the whole kind of fixed camera angle, and I suppose that in a way kind of added some intensity to it. The controls were pretty clunky, but this was back in '98. Things have kind of improved since then.
Yep.
So I think it's a great game for its time, certainly.
Mm-hmm. I also have Resident Evil 2 at number 4. Developed by Capcom and released in 1998, who are still making Resident Evil games to this day. They've made quite a few in a short space of time, because they remastered the second and the third, and now they're working on number 8, which I think is called Village as well. So they're working away pretty fast on those games, but clearly they're being a success, and it's quite good that they are making an actual sequel with 8, which looks like more in line with what they did with Resident Evil 7, which I didn't like, sort of the first person choice there, but with the Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3, what they did there I thought was really, really good. I did think Resident Evil 2 was a lot better than 3. Granted, Nemesis is quite a good villain for the third game, but at the end he just pops up so much that you don't really fear him anymore.
It's the Nemesis show, isn't it? They really kind of
because Mr. X, isn't it, from the second game? Who was quite good as well. I enjoyed fighting against him and stuff, and you could hear the music and you could hear his footsteps and that sort of thing. So I thought that was great. So I mean, don't get me wrong, the first time you meet Nemesis and you're in that little street or whatever, and he jumps at you and he's got tentacles and whatever else, it's intimidating, but just the further along Resident Evil 3 goes, the less impact that has, because he's kind of all over you by the end of the game. So but Go on.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, like, less is more. They kind of like, there was an overutilization of him, and it's like OP as well. He can now, create his own zombie slaves, and
Something like that.
yeah, they went a little bit, kind of over the top with him. He kind of makes Mr. X from Resident Evil 2 look like a Disney character, really, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Compared,
sort of.
but yeah.
Yeah, we both have the same number 4, which is kind of cool. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is a game released in 1997. There's actually been a few games in this franchise, and there is a new one coming out, I believe, next year. I'm not sure if it's been given an official release date, but Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey. A game that I love. I love for the quirkiness, the weirdness of it. It's essentially at its core, it's a platform puzzler. But it's definitely kind of a thinking man's game as well. It's quite challenging. I mean, the real challenge in this game is to try and kind of save all 100 Madokans. If you do that, if you are good enough to do that, you get the good ending. There's actually 2 endings. If just one of them dies, you get the bad ending. But what I love is the sense of humour that this game has. It's, they've created a great icon, a great character in Abe. I just love the character designs in this game. The sligs, the slogs, the what they call the paramites, the scraps,
Parasites or something. Something like that.
Yeah, they've just kind of created. I love the world that this game created and gave us. I remember playing the demo and I thought, this is different. This is a game that kind of stands out from the crowd. And admittedly, I'll be honest, I never completed it. And I'm kind of ashamed of myself. I never got to the end of it. I know it was remastered for the PlayStation 4 called under the title Oddworld. I believe it was called Fresh and Tasty.
New and Tasty, yeah.
New and Tasty, sorry. Yeah, a remake, essentially a remaster. I probably do need to purchase it, actually, at some point.
It's a really good remaster, actually, yeah. I've played it 3 times, all of which I got bad endings on, but...
yeah.
It's
it's a really good game. It's like I say, it's one of them games that does... Certainly when it was released in 97, there wasn't a game like it. I love the whole, the chanting that you do. You can possess the sligs, and you really got to kind of think your way through that game, and that's what I like. I like a game that requires you to kind of use your brain cells. Oddworld Abe's Odyssey definitely holds kind of a special place in my heart when it comes to PlayStation 1 titles.
Yeah, it's quite incredible with that game, the amount of, because it's a dark, gloomy world, it really is. You think of, because there's themes of, slavery and just, death and torture and all this.
But they're eating them, aren't they? Yeah, they're actually eating the workers.
But they somehow, it's a talent to, the writing team, pretty much.
Yeah.
Able to make Abe this comedic, kind of goofy, at times goofy, sort of clumsy character, and... Yeah. It's rare that you'll see such a perfect balance of really, really dark themes, but then Abe's hitting his head on something, and then he's falling down in a cutscene or whatever, or if you accidentally run into the wall or something, and he trips over.
Yeah.
And I can't think of too many TV shows, games, and films that have been able to do that sort of balance really well. So
yeah, I always remember the hi, follow me, wait here, all that. And obviously the next game in the franchise is called Soulstorm. And I've seen some footage of it, seen some trailers. Looks very impressive. I'm really excited because this is a franchise that's not had a game for a long time. I believe the last game in the franchise, excluding the remake, of course, is Stranger's Wrath.
I think that was it, yeah.
Which is a very different... It's set within the Oddworld universe, but it's a very different kind of game. I don't think it's actually a kind of a 2D platform puzzler, if you will. So I really do feel like another Oddworld game is very much welcome and very kind of long overdue.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, yeah. My number 3 is Oddworld, but Abe's Exodus. So the sequel to the first game that you just mentioned, also developed by Oddworld inhabitants, which are now independent and working on Soulstorm, the remaster that you mentioned, released in 1998. So the year after, I think. It's really interesting with Soulstorm as well because I think it's Lawrence Lanning or Lauren Lanning. His name is something like that. And
Okay.
he's spoken before about like Soulstorm isn't just a remake or a remaster of Exodus. It's actually because they were a bit sort of crunched with development time on the second game, which
Yeah.
from what I remember hearing was 9 months, which is quite short to develop a game and fully release it and all that. What he's basically said is this game is going to be able to take more of the game's original vision. So like instead of being forced to develop a game within whatever time, because this game's already been in development for at least 3 years or so.
Yeah.
He's gonna basically still take kind of the core of what Exodus is, but add the ideas in to the sort of bigger picture game that he's talked about before, which I think it is great that they actually get the opportunity to finally do that. Over 20 years later, which is great. So yeah, I've already seen they've shown some trailers and some gameplay. It looks very, very ambitious, and I think they've got certainly the talent to pull it off. It already looks very, very good from what they're trying, but yeah, the world sort of looks
Yeah.
bigger and more ambitious and everything like that. So I'm very, very excited. So we almost had the same game, but a different one in the same franchise. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Because there was actually Munch's Odyssey as well, wasn't
yeah,
there? But that was
that's
on the
on
Xbox
Switch.
original
If
release.
anybody wants to get that, I think Stranger's Wrath
Okay.
and Munch's Odyssey are both on Switch. Last time I
Okay.
checked, can't quite remember. I think they both are. So go and have a look out for those if you want to. Munch's Odyssey is more in line with what the original Abe games were, but it's actually a 3D one.
3D,
So,
yeah.
because Stranger's Wrath is like a different character and everything. So if you do actually want to experience an Abe game but more in 3D, Munch's Odyssey sort of did that. So there you go. We're on to number 2 now, aren't we? What is your number 2?
Okay, well, I was really kind of like these two were kind of number one and number two were kind of jostling for the top spot here. Now, this is a game that's certainly without a doubt regarded as not being just one of the best PlayStation games of all time, but some people would say one of the best video games of all time, and that is Metal Gear Solid, which was released in the UK in early '99. So again, kind of more towards the tail end of the PlayStation 1. What can I say? I mean, this game was pretty revolutionary. I mean, this game was fantastic. Very cinematic. I'd never played a game like it before. Its cutscenes and its story with twists and turns. Great gameplay for its time. It gave us a great protagonist in Solid Snake, who's just so goddamn cool. A lot of memorable characters. This game was kind of really helped to kind of popularize, I think, the stealth and the action genre within
Certainly,
video games. And like I said, it's got a very cinematic quality to it, but courtesy of Hideo Kojima, who I think Hideo Kojima may as well just go into films, because obviously this is quite a long-running franchise now, and as the franchise has gone on, the cutscenes, the cinematics have just kind of got more epic, and Metal Gear. So I say memorable characters. I mean, this has got probably one of the most memorable boss fights to me in video game history. Where you take on Psycho Mantis. You have to, because he's psychic, you actually have to change your controller to the other port. But if you remember, he can actually read what games are on your memory card. All the games that you've got saved on there, he actually... And I'm like, this is back in '99. I'm like, what the hell? How did they do this? And the only way I think you could actually beat him was to put your controller in port 2.
Yeah, it's true.
But it was, so it just, Metal Gear Solid was just, it's a game that I completed quite a few times. There was a lot of great little Easter eggs, and it was very much kind of a nod to kind of like a tribute, if you will, to like the 70s and 80s Cold War action films and thrillers as well. Metal Gear Solid, I think, just a fantastic game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly would agree with that. I do also have Metal Gear Solid 1 as my second one, but we aren't going to have the same first game. Don't worry. Hey, we clearly agree on a lot of stuff here, so which is cool.
Great minds and all that.
Yeah. But Hideo Kojima, just he's I think the words we've used to describe him before is both weird and wonderful, because he certainly comes up with some weird stories and characters and all that, but he's a wonderful person from everything I've heard, and how Jeff Keighley talks about him and all that sort of thing. It's really quite a disgrace how Konami's not only treated, their games and their staff and everything, especially within the last couple of years, but how they treated Kojima himself. They were clearly the biggest thing that he had. He's gone now. He's got his own. It's called Kojima Productions. They did obviously Death Stranding. Is that 2018, 2019? I think that was a 2019 game.
2019, yeah.
I think I remember having it on my best of 2019 list. But yeah, he's gone off to do that and like separated himself from Konami and everything, which is great. Worked with PlayStation obviously to make Death Stranding, which is again a weird and wonderful game with Norman Reedus and that. Yeah, certainly is a man who can attract quality as well. He's worked with Mads Mikkelsen and Guillermo del Toro and Norman Reedus and all these other really big names and everything. I think in the second season of Classic Reviews that I did actually do an episode on Metal Gear Solid 1, because I played this on the PlayStation Classic, and I used because I've got this like USB sort of device, this adapter sort of thing, and you can plug it into the PlayStation Classic, and I connected my PS4 controller to it, so I didn't have to use the analogless stick controller, the one that didn't have the analog sticks with it. That's the one that comes with your PlayStation Classic, but I was able to use the PS4 controller and use like analog stick and all that, which was a much better experience probably. But I remember going in and thinking like, hey, I played Metal Gear Solid 5, I thought that was a great game and everything, but I just never really dipped into the previous games before that. And I went in kind of thinking like, oh, it's going to be all clunky and horrible and all that because it's, a PlayStation 1 game. But no, it really, really surprised me actually. I really quite enjoyed the experience of it. So I think I remember seeing some of it or playing some of it when I was a bit younger, but didn't play it properly or anything like that. So yeah, that's it's certainly a very, very memorable PlayStation 1 game. And again, one of the births of one of the greatest characters in video games, Solid Snake. I just hope that we see him sometime again in the future.
Yeah,
but that's
I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember when I played it. I played the demo, and I'm pretty certain it came with Silent Hill, which is also obviously a Konami game.
Right.
I'm sure it was Silent Hill or another Konami game, and yeah, I remember playing the demo to Metal Gear Solid. I was like, do you know what I mean? My younger self was just blown away, and I'm like, I'm going to buy this on release. and then, of course, Metal Gear Solid 2, which was hugely anticipated. I really liked Metal Gear Solid 2, which was obviously on the PlayStation 2, but at the same time, I felt robbed and cheated, and I think a lot of people did, because you only kind of play Solid Snake for like the first third of the game.
Yeah.
And then obviously it introduces the character of Raiden. Yeah, and I just wanted more Solid Snake.
Yeah.
It was a really good game. I wish that move wasn't played, but I thought Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater was an improvement. I thought that was a great game.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that was a pretty poor decision to switch over to Raiden and everything, because I don't think he's a very good character. Especially not compared to Snake and stuff. So that's both our number twos, I guess. What's your number one?
Okay, number one. I think you could probably guess what this is going to be. This is a game I've talked about a lot. This year there was actually the first chapter in a remake of it, and that is Final Fantasy VII, the game that introduced me to the world of Final Fantasy. It's the game that introduced me to JRPGs in general, and obviously it was the first game in the franchise to actually get a big commercial release success, if you will, in Europe. Final Fantasy VII, I mean, what can I say? 3 discs, which was kind of unprecedented at the time. I know that originally it was supposed to be on the Super Nintendo, but they realized they'd need about 700 cartridges to actually make that happen. So it was saved for the PlayStation, and I immersed a lot of time in this game. I really liked its story, its characters. I'm a big fan of turn-based combat, where, a lot of strategy is involved. Cloud Strife, the lead character in this game, is, I think if you were to line up Final Fantasy, most fans would probably agree, he's probably the most iconic character in the franchise. Either him or Sephiroth, who's obviously also in the Kingdom Hearts games. Sephiroth's also, the big villain in this. I loved it. I mean, the summons, you can summon materia. It was just, I mean, I never completed it. It was 3 discs, and I probably accumulated about 60 hours on this game and still hadn't completed it.
Wow. Yeah.
Because with JRPGs, you do have to immerse a lot of time. You can't just run from A to B. You've got to level up. There's a lot of grinding involved. But I actually never lost any enthusiasm or excitement. I just got to the point actually where I got to the later bosses in the game and I hadn't leveled up enough and I just really struggled. But it's a hell of a game. In my personal opinion, I haven't played all of the Final Fantasy games. It's my personal favourite. I know it's regarded by many to be probably the best in the franchise. And from what I played of the remake, loved it. But again, I haven't really got that far into it. Admittedly, I don't play video games as much as I used to. But from what I've seen of the remake, it's very good.
Cool. Yeah. The Final Fantasy series is never one that's really clicked with me. I played some of 15, which I didn't think was very good. I did try the 7 remake, part 1 of who knows how many parts it's going to be. But I played some of 7. I appreciated it a lot, certainly. It just didn't click with me as a game that I needed to play and finish. But the fans of the game that have played the remake and stuff, such as yourself, have really said that they've enjoyed it. And at the end of the day, if you manage to serve the old audience, for, the previous audience for the game and stuff, and you can make them happy, like nostalgic wise and that sort of thing, then you've achieved something at the end of the day. But I didn't think it was bad or excellent or anything. I was kind of just completely neutral on it. I thought it was a good game, but it just never quite necessarily clicked with me, and I kind of moved on from it. But I still very much appreciate how popular it's been and stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's often on a lot of lists for one of the best video games of all time, etc. It's a game, for nostalgic reasons, I love it because it was my first. It was the one that it just completely immersed me. Instead of actually studying my GCSEs and that, I was busy playing that. And the reason I didn't do well at school, I blame on that game. Because its story immersed me. But yeah, admittedly, one of the things I was very skeptical about actually with the remake, and a lot of people was because obviously it's not turn-based in the traditional sense anymore.
Yeah.
But it's not hack and slash either. You watch the trailer, you think this looks very hack and slash button mashing. It really isn't. There's a great level of strategy in each fight, etc. But I'll admit I do like the old school turn-based combat. I've always been a big fan of that. I mean, even Pokemon. Not that I'm a huge fan of Pokemon, but I like that whole kind of, turn-based formula. But, I think Final Fantasy's not one of the most accessible. It's definitely an acquired taste, I think, that franchise.
Yeah. My number 1, to nobody's surprise, is Crash Bandicoot 3. You all knew that when you pressed play on this podcast to begin with. Crash Bandicoot 3, developed by Naughty Dog, who I think are my favourite developer. Last of Us 2, Uncharted, Crash Bandicoot. They've really done a lot that's made me happy and stuff. Released in 1998, of course, now owned by Activision and not developed by Naughty Dog or anything. But because of course Naughty Dog's moved on and done other games since then. But it's a game that does mean a lot to me. I'm really, really looking forward to what they're going to do with Crash Bandicoot 4 and everything like that. I think that looks really, really good. See, a lot of people, when they go to talk about the best of Crash Bandicoot 3, and you do only hear about 1, 2 and 3, and obviously, like you said, with number 1 being just... I think number 1's a bit of a different beast, definitely, to the others. It's just fundamentally a little bit different. You can't run, you can't slide, you have one jump, you can spin once, you can't do any of this like double jump or sliding or running or anything like that. You get those things later in the franchise. A lot of people criticize the third one for having some mechanics that didn't quite make sense, because you've got like the Wumpa Fruit Bazooka, you've got the tornado spin, you've got the slide, the double jump. And a lot of people have kind of said like, oh, you can just, once you've unlocked the fruit, the Wumpa Bazooka thing, you can just like stand in the levels and shoot everything in front of you and complete them. That's true to a degree, but to me, right, when you go to play a Crash Bandicoot game, you're gonna want to collect all the gems and the crystals and the time trials and all that stuff. You can't do that in a level if you want to get the time trial, because you'll just completely run out of time. It's already close enough as it is. So I understand to a degree the whole like, oh, you can just sort of stand back and shoot everything in front of you. First of all, that's not a fun option at all. Like I wouldn't choose to sort of do that. In fact, I remember when I unlocked the bazooka in the third game, I didn't really use it a whole lot because I still wanted to run and jump and spin and do all the normal stuff that you do. So I understand that criticism to a degree, but I don't agree with it, if that makes sense. Plus, like I said, if you want to go for the 100% completion in Crash Bandicoot 3, you can't use that with time trials. So, but no, I think the inclusions of, I mean, if you look at what they've done, they've evolved the character over time, because you look at the first game, a basic jump, one spin, can't run, you can't slide. The second game, I think you could you run in the second game? You could definitely slide and double jump, and I think you could spin a little bit more. And then in the third game, you've got even more added. And then in the fourth game, the one that's going to come out in, just over 2 weeks, and they're adding like all these different masks and stuff. So it's been great to just sort of sit back and watch and play these games and look at how this character has evolved over time. But I think the third game's still the best example. I think it's got also some of the best levels, the best warp room. I think the story is kind of more interesting and stuff there. You've got more involvement with Coco and all that. So yeah, I think it's the best of the Crash games. I do think that Crash Bandicoot 4 is going to beat the third one as the best game in the franchise. Of course, the other ones we won't talk about. Crash of the Titans and all these other nonsensical kind of games that came out. So. Yeah, but that's my number one. Not that anybody's going to be particularly surprised, but what do you think of Crash 3? I know you kind of mentioned it a bit earlier.
Yeah, Crash 3. I mean, it's a tough one because I really like all three of them. It's really tough because the third one does throw a bit more variety into it, but it's like you said. Then some people kind of turn around and say, "Well, it doesn't feel like Crash Bandicoot now." Because they're throwing so many different gameplay styles, like the jet ski and the plane levels and all that. But to me, they were perfectly welcome. I still really like the first one. It's like you said, though, because that was an early release. That was released in early '96, wasn't it? So, Naughty Dog was still trying to try and find solid footing with this franchise and stuff, So it was a little more kind of limited, but I think Crash 3 is great fun. I think all three of them are really good platformers. But yeah, with the third game, I actually liked and welcomed some of the new kind of gameplay features in it.
The thing for me, it still keeps very much the core of what Crash Bandicoot is there, while just adding these kind of, because you don't have to use the bazooka, you don't have to use the tornado spin. Or whatever, but they're these optional kind of things that you can sort of put in there. So
yeah, it must be noted as well, the two toughest levels in the entire franchise, from what I know, were both in the first game.
Yeah, Stormy.
And they were the levels on the oh no, not even, no, it was the two levels on the bridge.
Yeah, the bridge that like falls apart. And that.
There's one of them where you have to use the turtles to bounce across the bridge. There's huge gaps.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. Even on the PS4 remaster, that was really hard. Yeah,
they are tough. They take, admittedly, the first time I tried doing it, I must have lost about 15, 20 lives plus. So it really does kind of push your kind of platforming skills to the limit, levels like that. I think they certainly toned down, not that it's a bad thing or anything, they certainly, I think, toned down the difficulty by the third game somewhat. But it's still,
it's tough,
it's still great fun.
Yeah. So, which it looks like the fourth game is going to kind of follow that formula as well. But certainly quite a crazy game, the first one. So, but that's our list for the top 5 and honourable mentions and whatnot for PlayStation 1 games. We are planning to do the same with PlayStation 2 and 3, and probably by the time we've done those, we'll be able to at some point do the PlayStation 4 ones as well. Of course, not every game that's going to come out on PS4 is actually out, because there's still quite a lot of games from the end of this year. But we'll go through the PlayStation 2 and 3 ones first, and then we'll worry about the PlayStation 4 podcast later. But yeah, I think that's certainly a good thing to do if you're up for doing that. The PlayStation 2 and
I'd
3
certainly
as
be
well.
up for that.
Yeah,
Yep,
there's already
definitely.
some
Yeah.
games I can think of to put in there. So, and
Yeah.
if you have listened for a good few years, you probably know what my number one is for PlayStation 3, but we'll reveal that at a later date. So, yeah. But anyway, thank you all very much for listening. What are some of your favourite and best PlayStation 1 games, or not just PlayStation games? Not just PlayStation 1 games. Sorry, what are your favourite PlayStation games from either 1, 2, 3, or 4? And what are you looking forward to seeing as well on the PlayStation 5? We're going to find out a little bit more this Wednesday, so tune in for whatever they're going to talk about on Wednesday as well. So you can email your thoughts and questions and whatnot at matthew@entertainmenttalk.org, Twitter eTalkUK. There's a contact page and information in your show notes, so get involved. Do you disagree with our lists, which is perfectly fine. Yeah, let us know how you feel about all of that. You can find everything else that we've got on entertainmenttalk.org. Lots of stuff going on at the moment. The Breaking Bad podcast has launched, the Breaking Bad Rewatch podcast, the Boys podcast as well for the Amazon Prime series, Gaming Talk podcast as well if you want more gaming discussion. That's with Robert, either on Tuesdays, Wednesdays or Thursdays. We're planning to do the episode this week on Thursday, so it'll be the day after the PlayStation 5 event, so have a look out for that as well. Also, cinemas have reopened, so look out for some film reviews that I've done already. New Mutants, Tenet, some other ones is coming soon as well, so have a look out for all that. You can support the podcast. There's a few different options for you. Patreon, you can have a look at the $1 and $3 level tiers for instant ad-free podcast and instant review options as well. Amazon affiliate link, if you're buying stuff on Amazon, we can get a small cut. It won't cost you extra. iTunes feeds, please rate, review, subscribe to those. Go and also look for the new Breaking Bad and the Boys podcast. Those are also available on Spotify as well, because they've been put on there, so have a look out for those. Barry is on Talk and Stalk on YouTube as well. That's for the horror podcast. And if you want some DC podcasts to listen to as well, Snyder Cut, Batman, Suicide Squad, etc., that's Geektopia on YouTube. So look out for those, Geektopia and Talk and Stalk on YouTube. Get yourselves subscribed to that as well. That would be really good. If you want to know about up-to-date, reliable TV and film news, David's got you covered. Geektown.co.uk, Geektown Radio as well on Tuesdays. Have a look out for those episodes as well, and also look out for Geektown on iTunes and subscribe over there. Bex is streaming daily at the moment on Twitch. You can search for her, Trista Bytes, Trista Bytes. Go and search for that on Twitch, follow there, subscribe and everything over there as well. Word of mouth, you can simply tell people that you know about the website, iTunes feeds and everybody else's work as well, or everybody else's content. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, and if you can in different Facebook groups, that really helps out as well. Let's Play Sundays has returned. There will be a new episode around about the time this episode goes out as well, so look out for that as well for Let's Play Sunday episodes on Sundays. Thank you all very much for listening, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.